God has not allowed him to harm me. Wow. Wow. What an amazing thing. The company that fired me, by the way, did not fulfill their contractual obligations. I ended up losing quite a bit of a contractual obligation that they had, which was a significant amount of money. I never saw that. They ripped me off. But at the same time, God didn't allow them to harm me. God's been good. He's been gracious. In the process of what was a financial loss, God said, that's pocket change to me. Don't worry about it. And He brought me through that. He brought me through that. And by the way, it's easier for me to go back and gloat and say, well, God's blessed me, but He sure hasn't blessed them very well. And I do like to do that once in a while because it's true. But I can look at this verse and say, wow, God has not harmed. He has not allowed them to harm me in any way, shape, or form. God's been good. He's been gracious. If He said the speckled ones will be your wages, then all the flocks gave birth to the speckled one. If He said the streaked ones will be your wages, then all the flocks bore the streaked young. Interestingly, what Jacob was saying was, now remember, he's just said, your fathers cheated me by changing my wages 10 times. Now what he's saying is, my wages came from God. See, they came from, if God said, it's going to be the speckled one, He blessed me through the speckled ones. Through the streaked ones, that's how I'm going to bless you. What he was saying is, God is my source. God is my provider. I acknowledge that God is in control. So God has taken away your father's livestock and has given them to me. Wow. What an interesting statement. Because those were Laban's goats and sheep at one time. Remember, just a few of them. And he gave them to Jacob. And God blessed those. He blessed that herd. In breeding season, I once had a dream which I looked up, saw that the male goats mating with the flocks were streaked, speckled, was spotted. What a terrible dream. And the angel of the God said to me in the dream, Jacob, and I said, here I am. And he said, look up and see that all the male goats mating with the flock are streaked, speckled, was spotted. I don't ever want to have this dream. But that's the dream, and God was speaking to him, and he understood that. And I love what verse 13 he says. What in the dream God spoke to him and said, I am the God of Bethel. Bethel meaning the house of God. I am the God of the house of God. That place where you met me, remember that place where you met me on the way out here? I am that God. I am the God that blesses you, that promises you, that says that I will sustain you. I am the God that says I have a purpose and a plan for your life. I am your God. Now, leave this land at once and go back to your native land. Boy, when God speaks like that, you better listen. And so, change began for Jacob. And so, for the next few moments as we finish our study here, I want us to take a look at, we're going to look at 4 categories, but really there's a little bit more than that. 5 things that you need to do really for handling change. How do you handle change in your life? When change happens in your life, and you are either going through change right now, or you are going to go through some significant change in your life. What are the 5 things that you have to do? First of all, you have to take a realistic look at the current situation. Obviously. You have to take a very realistic look at the current situation. Genesis 31 verses 14 through 16. Then Rachel and Leah. Now remember, he's brought Rachel and Leah into the equation. And he said, guys, what do you think? What should we do? This is the circumstance. And this is what God has said to me. I'm turning it over to you now. What do you think we should do? And then verse 14 says, Rachel and Leah replied, do we still have any share in the inheritance of our father's estate? The answer to that, by the way, was no. Does he not regard us as foreigners? And the answer to that is yes. Not only has he sold us, but he has used up what he has paid for us. Surely all the wealth that God took away from our father belongs to us. You can insert the word anyway, because it did. God had blessed Jacob, so they had all of that wealth. They were inheritors. They were Jacob's family, so they had inherited all that anyway. So they were saying, look, all the wealth that God took away from our father, it's ours anyway. And our children. All of those things that Laban had that could have been ours, that were part of our inheritance, we get anyway. Because God has blessed you, Jacob. He's honored you. He's blessed your commitment to Him. And because of that, you have been blessed. And so we have received the inheritance anyway. So do whatever God has told you. Wow. Take a real realistic look at the current situation. How, and we're good at this, I mean, because we're Americans, but we take a look at change and we go, how bad is it? You ever get into that discussion? You know, I remember having staff meeting or something happened at the office or something like that. People would come in, we'd have a conference, and one of the first questions somebody would say, okay, how bad is it? You know, how bad is it? How many of you, in one way or another, even if you never verbalize it, don't raise your hand because I know the answer to this. How many of you, when you heard about our church situation last Sunday, how many of you said, how bad is it? Somehow or other you asked that question. How bad is it? It can't be that bad. Oh yeah, it is. How bad is it? We have a tendency to look, how bad is it? Now let me ask you, when was the last time you said, how good is it? When change happens in your life, why not go to God and say, okay, God, change is happening. How good is it? Where am I going to now? We always assume that change is negative. We know that once in a while it's positive and it's good, you know, like we get a better job or you know, something happens and you know, something's wrong with the car and it turns out it's not as bad as we thought it was. You know, that's good. You know, so we're excited. Sometimes good things happen to us. But generally we're negative and we think, how bad is it? But yet, we are to take a realistic look and say, how good is it? Take a realistic look at the situation. Go ahead and ask how bad it is, but make sure that you also ask, how good is it? What are the good? What are the possibilities here? We have a lesson, and by the way, if you've not studied this lesson, I encourage you to go back and find the study. It's either on the website or you can get the CD for it. But do the study on, find the study on possibilities versus probabilities. We tend to think in probabilities. We think probably this will happen, probably this is going to happen, probably that, probably this won't happen. We think in probabilities, but God thinks in possibilities. In fact, the Word says that nothing is impossible with God. It doesn't say nothing is improbable with God. This is nothing is impossible. God doesn't think in probabilities. God has never said the word probably. He doesn't think that way. He thinks he looks at your life and he looks at the possibilities. He doesn't look at the probabilities. He looks at what can be accomplished. And God wants us to think that way also. So take a realistic look at change in your life and say, God, what are the possibilities here? What is it that you want to do? I want to tell you how I'm thinking and praying for this church right now. I'm looking at the possibilities. God has put us in a place to cover the entire eastern Jackson County area. Tell me we're not in a place to reach eastern Jackson County for Christ. We are in a position that is a position of strength and power. There are more possibilities in this church than I have ever seen before. There is a new attitude. Boy, if you were in the worship service this morning, you saw that. There is a heart for God. The possibilities are amazing right now. God is ready to do something really exciting if we'll just get in on the realistic view of what God can do. Quit thinking about the probabilities and start looking at the possibilities. Take a realistic look at the current situation. And probabilities aren't realistic. God's possibilities are realistic. Secondly, obey God. Genesis 31, 17 through 18, verses 17 and 18 says, Then Jacob put his children and his wives on camels. Then he drove all his livestock ahead of him, along with all the goods he had accumulated at Padan Aram, and to go to his father Isaac in the land of Canaan. All he did was he started obeying God. Now, I want you to key in on a couple of things about this. First of all, be careful to not dishonor God by your actions. When change happens, it's important that you do it God's way. You obey God and make sure that your actions do not dishonor God. Do not do things that dishonor God. When change is happening, it is so important for you to be so focused on God. I want to make sure that I do not dishonor you. But two things happened. Rachel dishonored God and Jacob dishonored God. Now God overcame that, but I want you to see two examples of what happened here. First of all, Rachel failed to completely trust God. Rachel, who had just before said, along with Leah, said, do we have any Cheryl? You know, God has obviously blessed you, and we know what God is up to, do what God wants you. But instead, she decided that, I need to have a plan B. I need to have a back door. And so what she did, verse 19 says, when Laban had gone to shear his sheep, Rachel stole her father's household gods.